Hey, welcome to DDCEO today. Chris and I have a doozy for you. Got a great guy that has built some pretty cool stuff when it comes to technology, and this world is really going to a high tech culture, high businesses, and many businesses. If you don't embrace technology, you're going to be lost in the dust. And Michael's a guy that's done a lot in technology and continues to. It's fun to talk to somebody like Michael. Michael Katz, welcome today to DDCEO. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Gary, thank you for having me.
So Michael's in Southampton, New York, a New York, Boston guy, but hangs out in New York because that's where the job is, huh, Michael?
Boston strong. Yeah, well, we got this older dog who's kind of like end of life dumped on us at the end of the summer. And so we've been like taking care of him. He was really only supposed to live like a week, and this was back in August. Fast forward, like 5 months at this point, and he's still around. So it pulls me between New York City and Southampton.
Awesome, man. I saw that you're a rescue dogs and stuff, and that's really cool. I love dogs. I just got a new dog myself, and I hadn't had one for probably 4 years now. My dog passed away 4 years ago, and he was a Shepherd Doodle, white German Shepherd, white poodle. And my girlfriend's son took on a beautiful German Shepherd. He bought a really expensive, purebred, all black German Shepherd, and she's a beautiful dog. But he got transferred to Dubai in a technology job recently, and
Wow.
so we took him here in Florida now, or her, I should say.
Okay.
And she's an awesome dog. I mean, she's a puppy, like 11 months old now, but she's a little bit of a challenge, but she's super smart. So it won't be long before we've got an amazing dog,
I love that.
So,
Yeah. The German Shepherds are super smart.
they are. If you work with them and give them a lot of love, they're going to be great. They're going to be great dogs every time. So,
Amazing.
what type of dog is that you have that you're extending the life for?
Always pit mixes. They're the most overpopulated dog breed in all the shelters, and they're the ones that most help. So always pit mixes.
My daughter just told me that the other day. She goes, "Dad, check this out." She just gave me the stats that she likes pit bulls and she likes French bulldogs and all that. And she said, "Check this out, Dad. These are the dogs that don't get adopted. They're so often they're such great dogs. It's just people don't treat them right, and they got a bad rap." But yeah, it's funny because I just heard this probably 3 days ago. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And they really are great dogs. I mean, they have a certain reputation, which is I think probably based more on like urban legend and some of the stuff that the media reports. But like they were originally bred to be nanny dogs, and when we brought my son home from the hospital 7 years ago, like both dogs just like fell in love with him and are like super protective over him, and it's been incredible to see.
My sister only gets pit bulls. Actually, my older sister loves pit bulls, and she's never had a problem with either. They're awesome dogs. So, good for you. That's cool. I mean, I think that if you can do it that way, and I would definitely consider that for my next dog. Rescue dog instead, because they're such great dogs that are going to waste, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so tell us, Michael. I love technology. I'm a blue collar guy that has built businesses in the blue collar world. And I found, probably took me about 15, 20 years to figure out that if I could bring technology to play in these blue collar businesses, I could really kick the snot out of my competition. And I did that in the field first, in the paving industry first. And then we did that also then with 3D technology, thermal imaging for engineering and assessment of properties. And today we have a technology company that's leading the industry in the world. And what basically we assess properties using drones, and artificial intelligence basically does all the data building and the engineering and everything for us. So it's really, really cool. And this business, it's called Site Technology, is really doing some amazing things. And that spun out of basically being a company that wanted to invest in the best engineering in the world and giving away that engineering. And then my son came on board to lead that company and said, "Yeah, we got to use artificial intelligence and drones. If we do that, we can do the stuff so much faster and so much better for our customers." And that's how it happened, right? So that's a SaaS product now. and we're loving it. The valuations of that company are crazy, and the profitability is great. So we're just loving it.
That's
So
awesome. Congrats. And it's got to be amazing to work with your son.
it really is. It's a blast. And you mentioned you're bringing your son home, and I remember bringing him home. We had dog waiting for him too. You grew up with a dog, also. I think that's a good thing. Okay, so tell us about your path, because you're a Yahoo, and then you're in management in another Interclick, a technology company. Is that right?
So Click was the first company I founded alongside with my brother Andrew. So I know what it's like to get to work with family. It's great when you have somebody that at the end of the day, even if there's disagreements, you can still always trust. There's nothing I hate more than like hearing stories about founders, co-founders, somebody gets stabbed in the back, that whole kind of thing. I've never had to worry about that, which is great. But Interclick was interesting. I would say that like we stumbled into it. There was no vision behind it. We just saw an opportunity based on some of my friends at the time who were building their own companies that started to put me on to digital advertising. And I knew nothing about it. I didn't study advertising in college. I was an economics and finance guy, but I figured, the opportunity, like these types of opportunities don't always present themselves. And so I always knew I was going to do something entrepreneurial. I just didn't necessarily know like when or how or where or even why. But so when the opportunity arose, a light bulb went off. It was like, okay, I think that like this is the moment I've been waiting for. And so I left my job, which was in consulting, to start Interclick, and very basic to start. I mean, we started with $30,000 of capital, and I'll never forget, because we started. It was myself, my brother, and we had one other co-founder, and the other co-founder, his father wrote a $25,000 check for us to get started. I put in 2,500. My friend put in 2,500, and he hands me the check, which was probably like the biggest check I'd ever seen in my life at that point. And like,
how old were you at this point?
I was maybe like 23, 24 or so. Yeah. So, I was like, oh my God, this is like endless money. It's like 25 grand. And that, like, right before he hands it to me, he like kind of pulls it back, and I'll never forget this. He said, make it work, because I'm not writing another one. I was like, okay, great. And we did. And, I spent countless hours just learning and absorbing anything I could about the world of digital advertising. Back then, it was in its infancy, so it was a little bit Wild West. There was a ton of opportunity, really unstructured ad buying and selling markets, and I felt like, just given my experience and my background, I could take a fairly data intensive, very process driven approach to the business, and I felt like we could probably out execute who would ultimately become our competitors, and we did. And we went from a standing start this is like 2003 or so, to a couple years in, we were doing north of $1 million in revenue. Then we went to 3, then we went to 10. Eventually took it public. Then Yahoo bought us in 2011. I watched it be completely dismantled and die a slow, painful death inside of a very large, inept organization. And then I started mParticle, which is my current venture.
So, okay, so let's recap this. This is amazing. I mean, I think that 2003 you started with that, 30,000 bucks, and then and you grew that fast. So did you grow profitably at that point? So you didn't need to take outside capital until you went public, or did you take outside capital as you went along?
We took a little bit of outside capital in, I want to say it was like 2008. I think it was a couple $1,000,000. Like it wasn't a massive amount. And then we were profitable, I would say almost every month from inception all the way through acquisition. At the time of acquisition, we were doing 150 million in revenue and dropping, probably 20% to the bottom line, a little bit more. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was always about um, strong business fundamentals. I mean, you talk about bringing technology to kind of blue collar environments. I kind of look at it like we almost did the opposite, really, which was like we took a little bit more of like a gritty, very nuts and bolts approach to building a business and applying that to technology. So I love that, like um, the paradox there. And
Yeah.
yeah, we sold for a little under 300 million. So I like to say we turned 30,000 into 300 million, which is a pretty good return for all involved. And yeah, I mean, we did it very capital efficiently. And we were like, I'd say that we probably took the toughest path that you can possibly take as an entrepreneur, because we went public really early. So we were a micro cap publicly traded company. Like we were trading on NASDAQ, but our market cap was 200 million for most of the time that we were publicly traded. And so not necessarily being properly capitalized, having the burden of these like 90-day sprints every quarter, report, and not just report, but hit and beat your expectations that you set. I mean, it becomes really tough to operate in those environments. And so I always tell entrepreneurs, like, avoid it for as long as possible.
Now, what are the positions you and your brother held during that time, or when you went public, or the position before public and after? What were your roles and responsibilities?
I was CEO, and I was on the board. He was CTO, and yeah, he's on the board of mParticle, but he wasn't on the board of InterClick.
And then and they kind of ruined it after that. I mean, it went backwards. And is it still in business?
No. I mean, it was dismantled many years ago, unfortunately. Yeah, look, when a big company buys a small company, it's like the big fish eats the small fish, not for the benefit of the small fish, right? It's for the benefit of the big fish, right? And so they took a bunch out of what we had created and repurposed a bunch of it. And so there's probably like elements that still exist inside Yahoo that are like derivatives of like the original tech.
Sure.
But that business is long gone.
So you feel that they got value out of it? I mean, for what they paid for it, do you feel like that the elements of the business that made you successful that they took out and used somewhere else, you feel like they received good value out of it?
I mean, look, I'll give you two answers. One, I don't care. I got value out of it. They paid me, and they paid me a lot of money. So I was very happy to do the deal. Two, I actually do think that they got a lot of value. I think with the things that we were doing at the time were pretty cutting edge. I would say to the point where like we could release these same capabilities now in 2024, and they would still be like leading edge, if not bleeding edge, in terms
Really?
of capabilities.
Can you give me an example, like one or two things that really differentiated you that were really ahead of your time?
Yeah, so I think everybody has started to become much more in tune with the idea that like data is an asset for businesses, right? And there's no necessarily intrinsic value to data. It's really about what you do with it, right? And so the technology that we built allowed us to ingest data from a variety of different sources and systems, formats, and get it into a homogeneous state in a relatively lightweight, flexible framework. And then I think a lot of the magic, a lot of the value that was created was in being able to then operationalize the insights from those various data sets to, at the end of the day, it was like, it helped us create a better mousetrap. It helped us deliver more targeted, better performing ads on behalf of our customers because we knew more about what consumers wanted, their preferences, their likes and dislikes. And so it was really like an efficiency play that allowed us to then scale the business. When we launched the technology in 2009, we were at 22 million or so in revenue. By 2011, we were at 150 million. So we more than 7x the business, and we did that without adding really any like net new sellers, right? So it wasn't just like, oh, we flooded the market with like salespeople. It was that the technology just really worked.
Awesome. That's awesome. You're like you said, it sold itself. You didn't need a huge sales force selling it.
Yeah.
And that's always a question. And we're dealing with that right now in the SaaS product we have. Is, we're now building a sales force, but the product currently sells itself pretty well. And if we advertise it properly in front of the right market, the big real estate market globally, I think that it would market itself without a lot of sales actually. And for us, the sales is all for us right now. Sales has been all in the feedback loop, right? So everything we do to serve that customer allows us to create more opportunity for relationship building and sales. So the business is pushing 20 million now in revenues and about 40-50% in net profit, and it's growing fast. It was only 11 million last year, I think, and I think we'll be 100 million within 3 to 4 years. So if we can continue, but again, the sale, we think our CEO wants to build a sales force, which I think I know we have to. Just don't know how much has to be inside sales and how much should be outside sales, affiliate sales, and things like that. So it's always a question you have as you're building these things, right?
Yeah. I think if there's like a complex deployment process, if it's a highly consultative sale, I think external sales is going to be critical. If it's a little bit more transactional, and it sounds like it may be because you said it sells itself, inside sales is probably the right starting point. I think it's a false dichotomy to say like, do we need sales or do we just try to make the product sell itself? You need both in my experience.
Yes. So I agree. You for sure need both. I think that inside sales, once the customer looks into the product, is the most important thing. Once there's a customer that's active and interested, right, then that's the sale. I feel like to build a sales force that doesn't have relationships in the real estate world almost is not as interesting to me as finding the biggest real estate relationship builders in the world and making them affiliate sales. And all they have to do is just introduce us, right, to the biggest real estate holders in the world, and our team will land a large percentage of the customers that they're in front of because of the product is so inexpensive and it saves them so much money in relationship to the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go. So that's good stuff I'm learning from you. Okay. So when you how long did you stay on board for a couple of years after the sale?
I stayed on board for a year.
And then, and how long before you started the new company?
2 weeks after that, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm not one to, at least like back then, I definitely was not one to stand still. I felt like I had the idea. I started to have conversations about the viability of that idea just to gauge people's reactions. And I could tell that there was something there. And so as I started to get more excited, I felt that, the kind of mental math in my head was such that like I felt like if we didn't do it and we let somebody else do it, I would definitely have regrets. And
Yeah.
so the cost of not doing it started to greatly outweigh anything else. And so it's like let's go. We're all in, raised a bunch of capital, and really haven't looked back since.
So to round out interclick, did you have a 1 year earnout, like contract to be to be there as a CEO or and a board member, and then an earnout with that, or no?
Well, there was, yeah, there's a bit of a longer story involved. When they bought us, we were a publicly traded company. Public to public deals are kind of tricky. You don't necessarily have a ton of room to negotiate as a public market CEO, right? Like you can't negotiate a bunch of protections for yourself, because you start holding up the deal and you're in breach of your fiduciary responsibilities, blah blah blah. Anyways, we went into Yahoo. Deal was announced on Halloween of 2011. Deal closed December. In between announcing the deal and the time that I left, there were 5 CEOs, so like 4 CEO changes at Yahoo over the course of a year. And at the end of
Wow.
the time there, I ended up just getting pushed out because I was a very highly compensated non-C-level employee who was brought in as an acquisition from like many CEO regimes prior, even though it was only like a year ago. So I ended up just getting pushed out. And like by then I was more focused on this next opportunity anyway. So I used it ultimately as motivation to build a
A little bit
bigger.
like, and Chris will remember, a little bit like our story, Mark Randolph's story from Netflix. I don't know if you know his story a little bit, but he was,
Oh,
him and Reed Hoffman basically were done with their roles and responsibilities, but yet they're supposed to go to work every day, and they just sat in the office trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And they didn't really engage with them very much. The new company that bought them, and so it was really easy for them to plan and what's the next thing. And Netflix was their next idea. Worked out pretty well. But very, it sounds very similar. The one you tell your story reminds me a lot of Mark Randolph's story, actually, but pretty
yeah.
cool. Hey, so this new idea, how did it come about? How did mParticle come about? And tell us about that business now.
Yeah, well, okay. So going back to Interclick, the platform that we built was this data platform that allowed us to end up looking at analyzing a bunch of different data sources and then making predictions on a client by client basis how those data points would end up impacting their ad campaigns. And so we built up a lot of domain experience around building data platforms and helping customers leverage their data assets to drive their business forward. The thing I didn't love about Interclick, I didn't love selling to ad agencies, because if you've ever had anybody on the show, or if you've ever had to sell media buying opportunities to ad agencies, it's pretty painful. Like there's no like real go to market strategy involved. Like the budgets are controlled by like the most junior people in the organization, most junior, most underpaid people in the organization. So like, what do you have to do? It's like, it's a lot of like whining and dining and client entertaining and relationship building, which is like, I think there's an element of that in like in any successful sales motion, but it was only that. There was no strategy beyond that. So I said like, I want to get out of that world, but we had built up just a bunch of great domain expertise in in the area around like helping customers utilize their data to drive business results. And so one of the things that we started to see, again, this is back in late 2012, now early 2013, it was finally, quote unquote, the year of mobile. It was the first time that people were spending more time on their mobile devices than they were like their desktop laptop. And like in hindsight, that's like, it's pretty obvious. It's been that way for quite some time, but at the time it was this big platform shift. And anytime there's a big platform shift, it's always a good time to start a new business, because so much gets disrupted. And what you end up having is innovator's dilemma, right? You have a bunch of the well-established companies who start to get bogged down based on the demands of their existing customer base, who don't have the resources, don't necessarily have the wherewithal to start paying attention to this like really small, nascent, emerging space. They tend to discount it, right? And we saw that. We saw that the legacy web-based data platforms weren't looking in the direction of like mobile apps, even connected TVs. Like they were still stuck in this web paradigm. And we felt like, well, we had just come from that world and there would be a pretty steep learning curve. Typically I like to zig when everybody else is zagging, or zag when everybody else is zigging. Right. And so we went a totally different way. And a lot of people were curious about like what this thing was. And I remember one of the CEOs from like one of these legacy data platforms wrote this like op-ed piece or this blog post. And it was basically like, it was targeted at us. And it was like, mobile data platforms are dead on arrival. And he had like all these reasons, and they were all right, but he was missing the point. The point was, this new opportunity is going to look nothing like the previous opportunity. It was ultimately like discontinuous innovation, right? And so that platform shift created a massive opportunity for us. And I mentioned the first business that we started, like there was no strategy, there was no vision, there was no roadmap in the early days. It was just like fight for survival, like just don't die. At mParticle, we've had a 10-year strategy since the beginning. We had to make a number of bets, and if those bets paid off, we felt like we could build a pretty big company. But we wanted to start by solving the mobile data challenges that are like unique to in-app experiences. So some of our customers think like Starbucks, Spotify, like apps that we all use to ultimately get through life, right? And we felt like if we could solve those challenges, we'd be set up to start solving the cross-channel, multi-channel data challenges, which really centered around like data quality and data governance. And so we spent a number of years tackling those challenges. And then we knew that would be the springboard for machine learning and AI. And that's where we've been focused over the past few years. But it was always take one step to get to the next, to get to the next.
So when you think about this, number one, I'm amazed you didn't go right back in that same industry that you grew that big company so fast in, right? That's pretty cool that you said, we don't need to compete with the old company, and we've got a new idea that's going to be better and whatever. I mean, that's pretty cool, because most people would just fall right back in that same trench they dug before, right? Which is that's very comfortable. And said you guys went a whole other direction in this data analytics. And I mean, describe to me what you guys do. Like, okay, and I want to use this. We've got 14 companies, but my most exciting is this technology company, because we're using data so our customers, the big like Walmart, Home Depot, Prologis, and Blackstone, are making way better decisions than they ever had before when it comes to maintaining their pavements, their roofs, and now their facades. We're going to do everything around building shortly, but right now pavements and roofs are our strongest suits with the best engineering in the world. And then facade assessment and all that's being built right now. But that's pretty complex because there's so many different types of facades in the building, whether it's steel or concrete or masonry, glass, or whatever, right? But we're gonna have that built shortly. Either way, but there's so much data beyond the data that we need for our engineering. When I say this, we fly a site, a 1 million square foot Walmart distribution center, and we're taking in everything, right? We're taking thousands of pictures from up close to far off, and we're focused on the engineering for pavements longevity and roof longevity and all that right now. But the data we capture is incredible. So when I say that, there's so many different data points that we could probably harvest. And we aren't yet, right? We're focused on the things that we're really good at and that we build businesses on. So again, how do you look at that kind of stuff? If you looked at a company like this and said, would you be able to use your skills and say, here's where you're missing it. Here's where you can gain a lot more value for your customers or otherwise.
Yeah. So data is kind of used as this like a bit of like a catch-all for any information artifact that's created as a result of something happening, right? And within any organization, like there's a lot of different types of data. There's financial data, there's employee data, there's customer data. There may be like firmographic data points, right? Like we are focused squarely on customer data. So I mentioned a couple of our customers in Starbucks and Spotify, but think large multi-channel consumer brands where there's a number of different touch points, but usually there's a mobile focus at the center of the customer experience. And so when we tend to work with companies, and we only work with consumer facing brands, when we tend to work with companies, they have a number of disparate data sets and data silos. And the problem when you have siloed data is that analytics are incomplete. Your segmentation and marketing strategies are probably going to be incomplete or disjointed. And you're ultimately like, you're not able to fully systematize the business in a way that data and information creates this like connective tissue throughout the organization. And so part of our job is creating that connective tissue through first ingesting all the data, helping cleanse it and get it into a high quality, homogeneous state. Before then, it is analyzed and then ultimately activated for whatever front office business activity may be required, whether that's like advertising or marketing, customer support, analytics, like you name it.
That's really cool. I mean, when you're talking about this stuff, it reminds me of so many things. In our back office, we have 14 companies, and there's so many things that we could share, but we didn't share. And nowadays, we're trying to create a very singular back office, a singular system that covers everything from sales estimating all the way through accounting and collections and everything, right? And we think we're almost there, but we're never there. So it's like we're never far enough, fast enough, or good enough, right?
Right. Amen.
But when you can do it well, especially when you have one product, it makes it a lot easier. We have about 7 different products in 14 different companies, so it makes it a little tougher. But I really understand what you're doing. I get it. It's just what are some can you name some brands that you work for that your company serves?
Yeah. Let's see. NBC Universal, JetBlue, JP Morgan Chase, Disney, like I mentioned, Starbucks, Spotify, McDonald's. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. PayPal, there's no shortage.
Wow, you're just at the tip of the iceberg. Probably, really, you can go a lot deeper with a lot more customers as you have success with those names, right? I mean, using those names to tell the story of success for others is captivating. I gotta believe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in a lot of the stuff that Jeffrey Moore has put out, Crossing the Chasm to Zone to Win. And like I do believe, because I've now seen it firsthand, like the way you get to this kind of market dominant position isn't by being all things to all people. It's by winning these small niches, right? So for us, it was let's knock down a couple wins in a number of key verticals, and then use that as the springboard to go deeper in those verticals, saying like, oh, hey, Burger King, we work with McDonald's, like you should probably work with us. We're the industry leader, that kind of thing. And then you start to find adjacencies, right? And then over the course of time, you have enough of these, you have enough kind of like niche market, like really strong, if not dominant positions. And in aggregate, it looks like, wow, okay, this is the mainstream market winner.
I love it. So basically find your zone, right?
Yeah.
You can get spread out really thin. And when you're solving the problems you're solving for customers you're solving for them, I'm sure there's lots of opportunities to go wide and do it for all different types of customers, small, large and small and whatever, right? But it's not going to be the best, the best use of your time, best use of your energy and your team. And when you can focus on this niche and be the best in the world at it, right? World class. What type of core values do you talk about, or when you talk to your team, and when you drive this build of this great team, what are the core values you think about that you really strike this vision out with them? But what do you use?
Excuse me. So yeah, I'll make just kind of like one final point on that, because I fully agree with everything that you just said. As a brand, like you have to know what you stand for, right? You cannot be all things to all people, right? And I think the hard part about that, especially for us entrepreneurs, is like implicitly it means like saying no to potential customers, right? But every time you say no, it frees up an opportunity to say yes to the right customer, right? And so I think that's critically important. And I think, for me, we've defined our values a number of times over the lifespan of this company. In the early days, the values were all about just like getting stuff done by any means necessary and not worrying about whatever would come next. Again, in the early days of any startup, it's like you're fighting for survival. There's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs that applies to startups, like just don't die, find shelter and water and live to fight another day kind of thing. Eventually, like not only do things change, but if you hold on to that mindset for too long, it can actually be counterproductive. And so my belief is that your value system, which is your most foundational system that you have within the business, because it ultimately informs every employee what to do when they think nobody's looking, or what to do in situations of like ambiguity or uncertainty, right? They're kind of like your default operating instructions. I think that those need to be looked at and refreshed probably every 18 to 24 months or so. So the things that we're focused on, making sure our employees stay focused on, like putting the customer first. Like the whole point of creating a business is to create customers for that business and to create value for those customers. And I think that can get lost over time.
Sure.
So always centering the organization and centering any decision making in what does it mean for the customer. So that's like, that's the first one. Encouraging people to find their flow, which is about having the agency to create the conditions around them for them to be successful. It doesn't mean like sitting and meditating all day or like taking, months and months of vacation. It means like owning and controlling your own destiny. Another one is place bets. So this is kind of a derivative of one of our early values. One of our early values was figure out how to, never why not. Because there's always a reason to not do something. There's always a reason to, like, there was a lot of reasons to not start the business, but you have to look past that and you have to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to commit to taking action and I have to fight inertia. So how am I going to get there? So placing bets. And I think that I like the idea of framing it as a bet, because if you've ever played cards or bet on sports or whatever, at some point, the bet's not going to pay off. And so you're not going to keep leaning into that bet. So you also have to know when to say when to quit ultimately. And then there's a couple more, but I'll summarize them as primarily focused on teamwork, winning as a team, making sure that people understand that the enemy, like your competition, is not internal with any other person or group. It's external. It's the status quo. It's the legacy solutions which we want to disrupt. So making sure that we get there as a team, because ultimately we're always going to be stronger when we come together versus when everybody's kind of rowing in different directions.
That's an awesome point, Michael, because I mean, so often when you have a lot of teammates, right, you're going to have some that just don't get along. You want them all to love each other, right? And we'll look out for each other, but it's not always practical. It doesn't always happen. A lot of different personalities don't mesh, even though you need all those personalities, right? But I love that, basically, really make that part of the fabric of your company. The competition is not internal, right? I mean, when they're not getting along and they're not communicating, it's costing all of us, all of you and all of us, money and time and putting us at risk, right? When we look at each other as competition instead of the competition. So,
amen. Yeah.
Such a simple concept, but boy, you see it every day. And in our world of construction services that we do, we're in some dangerous situations, whether it's on roofs or it's along highways or it's on parking lots and in distribution centers around trucks. And I preach this all the time when we've got some meetings coming up here next month, and we'll talk safety in a big way to our leaders and our teams. And basically, ultimately, I love every teammate to love each other, actually care about each other, right? Because then they'll look out for each other. But if they just like each other and respect each other, they're not going to accept somebody walking between a paver and a dump truck in my industry where they get decapitated or cut in half. They're not going to accept. They're not going to laugh about it. They're going to really get bothered seeing somebody make that mistake and take it very seriously. Compared to in the old days, I remember we'd have guys that laugh at another guy that did something stupid that could kill himself. Right? I mean, it's crazy, but that happens when people don't care about each other and they look at each other as competitors instead of the real competition. Right?
Oh, totally. And I think that there's a fine balance. I fundamentally don't believe that any team should try to pretend like they're family. We're not family. We're a team, but we do need to come together as a team. And we do need to care genuinely about each other and the collective outcome that we're all trying to achieve. And I feel like one of the things I've come to appreciate when there is a disagreement, or when there is maybe hostile communication, I feel like so much of it is avoidable.
So I just building that team, like you said, I hear often, right? Even around my business, people like, "Gary, it's like a family here, right? We're like a family." And I don't really correct them much because I want them to just care about each other any way they personally do. But I like the statement of, there are some family here. There's some people that really believe they are family, and that's awesome. But bottom line is we're a team, whether we're family, we're friends or not, right? We're a team out for the same best interest to kick the crap out of our competition and serve our customers at a world-class level better than anybody else can, right? Okay. And I think that's a great way to say it. No, we're not family, but boy, you know what? If you think you are, you care about each other, that's great. But we're a team, and we're a team that wins because we care about beating our competition every day.
You make a spot on the team. You have to earn it through performance. You don't earn a spot in your family, right? That's like a God thing. At least
And you can't be fired out of your family either, and you can't. I like that. So what we do in the end here, we like Chris takes a bunch of notes and stuff, and he likes to grab the nuggets for success that he hears, and then I might ask a couple of questions if that's okay, Michael.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, Michael, this is awesome, man. I'm hanging on every word. I wish we had like 2 more hours to cover you with questions, man. Dude, you have an incredible perspective on like marketing, the future of marketing, and how machine learning fits in there. And I know we're basically out of time, but I have to ask, like, it seems like you guys are kind of pioneers on the collection of data and then combining that data to fill in a lot of blanks with machine learning. Have there been any surprising outcomes from doing that? Like, unilateral across the board, like, okay, we've figured out that these blanks for people like this, like 90% of the time, they'll respond to why. Anything like that?
Yeah. I'll answer this across like both companies because I think the learnings are very different, but both pretty important. I think at InterClick, as we were ingesting lots of data from various sources, including third-party data sets, I think that we would always see anomalous behavior between like what people were interested in and maybe like their demographic, socioeconomic data points. And so the takeaway after looking at this and analyzing it pretty deeply is like there's always this aspirational element that I think is like intrinsic to all kind of consumer behavior. Like we all always want like the next best thing or like the thing that's like maybe slightly out of our reach, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that we're like the best possible prospect for it. But there's always that interest. And in recognizing that, you have to be able to separate signal from noise. The second one, which we've seen at InterClick, centers first and foremost just around the importance of speed and the speed of data movement. More specifically, we've seen multiple customers of ours save millions and millions of dollars by improving the speed by which data connects to the different downstream tools that they use to run and grow their business, whether that's like Google or Facebook or wherever else. You get that data talking, you get these systems talking to each other in real time that otherwise wouldn't be connected. And these things, like the investment pays for itself many times over. And so I felt like we understood that intellectually, but to see it and to see it happen like literally every single time is pretty cool.
Yeah, wow. And I'm sure there's a ton more to dig into, but
Yeah,
we're out of time. Yeah, I if we had more time, I wanted to ask you about any predictions you had with like VR data. Like I'm sure we're gonna be measuring people's like eyeballs where they look in a VR space, and yeah, ton of other sci-fi questions for you.
It's just more dimensionality onto the same type of analytics and marketing that we've been doing. I'd say like the biggest leap forward over the past number of years is adding like geospatial data. So like with our mobile phones, like we're always on the go, and so real world context. And I think that's just like there's an element of VR and biometric data to the extent that it's done in a privacy compliant way that takes that even one step further.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
So, hey, Chris, I picked up a few things that I liked. Some of the stuff you talked about, like, zag when everybody else is zigging, or vice versa. Fight to survive, just don't die. Okay. That's what, startups and small businesses, that's all I thought for my first 10 years, right? Just, fight to survive. Just don't die. That's a good one. And then, when it comes to data, I mean, we all got to continue to realize that data is an asset, and if we can harvest that asset, it's going to be good for ourselves, our customers, and our survival, right? You can't be all things to all people. I love that, because I preach that to my leaders as much as I can. Probably not enough though. After listening to you, Michael, I'm going to go back to my team and talk about it a little more, because I know there's some of our businesses were going off in another direction in some ways, and you got to make sure they stay in their zone. And that's the other thing you talked about, is find your zone and stay in it, right? And then a couple of things. I really like the competition is not internal. We've got to continue to drive that, because as you have more and more teammates, there's going to be just people not liking each other, not getting along, and boy, that really hurts everyone, not just themselves, but the whole team, and the bottom line, and the service to your customers. So really cool stuff. But I mean, you're for a young guy, you've done some amazing things, and you're going to continue on. I can't wait to see where you go with this, with mParticle, and then how long before you roll this thing into a public company and do the next thing.
Yeah, we will see, one day at a time, my friends.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for.
Where can our audience find out more about you before we part ways?
Let's see. On Twitter or X, mKatz 0630. Usually post about technology and sports. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the best place.
mKatz
0630.
All right. Michael A., it's awesome having you on, buddy. Really appreciate you being there. You're quite a story, and you're quite an entrepreneur, and you're going to inspire a lot of people. And that's our goal, is to inspire people to really continue to push and create, because that's what we do. That's all, the American dream that you've lived and been blessed to live, and I have been blessed to live. We need to keep sharing that, because we need more people like just driving for that American dream, because nowhere else in the world you can do what we do, in my opinion. And we're blessed to be here.
Amen. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Michael. Till next time. Thanks a lot, Michael. DDCEO out.